Good afternoon. I see that we have 39 participants. Thought it would be a little bit more, but I guess I'll wait a couple of minutes to see if we get any more participants. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Maybe 39 is our number. All right, let me get my screen situated here. First of all, my name is Johnny Bynum. I'm here with OPM, and I will be talking to you guys about retirement application processing. This is a subject matter that is a hot topic in federal HR because we streamlined the process of how agencies submit their retirement application package to OPM. Before we streamlined the process, we were getting applications that came in and they were all different. So OPM set in motion to streamline that process and outline how agencies should submit those applications. Also in 2009, we created the retirement application audit, which is an audit that turned into a monthly audit of submissions that you guys submit to OPM. We're going to talk about the audit and some of the ins and outs of the audit. Okay, so let's just get right into it. One second, let me make sure I can get my, okay, so our objectives for today is you will be able to assemble accurate and complete applications for voluntary retirements, disability retirements, early outs, and discontinued service retirements. In this session, you will learn to determine if the employee meets age and service requirements. We're going to talk about what forms are necessary to process a retirement application. And we're also going to talk about some common errors that can delay payments, which is something we don't want. Okay. When I teach this session, I normally discuss all the necessary forms involved in adjudicating retirement applications. But in the essence of time, I have taken the form section out. But I will discuss the flow of the application from the moment an application packet leaves your desk through its completion, complete adjudication through your payroll provider and OPM. Okay, additionally, you will learn the case flow. I'm sorry, let me get your slides together here. You will learn to determine if the employee meets the age and service requirements. We're going to talk about what forms are necessary to process the application, and we're going to talk about common errors that delay payment. Okay, additionally, you will learn the case flow from the point the employee meets with the HR specialist through its completion at OPM. We're going to learn the responsibilities of the personnel office, the payroll office, OPM, and the responsibility of the retired employee, because they do have a responsibility in this process. We're going to talk about what information is critical for OPM to authorize retirement payments. Okay, let's start with retirement eligibility. I'll get my cursor on the screen here. We'll talk about retirement eligibility. Okay, so before you can process a retirement application, you have to make sure that the person is eligible for retirement. We've had a number of cases in the past where individual employees were not eligible to retire, and the agency had to bring non-eligible employees back to work, which could be a huge deal and probably a huge headache. Okay, this section will go over the basic eligibility requirements for federal civilian retirement. Okay, so we're going to start with CSRS. Okay, on the CSRS, an individual must have at least 5 years of creditable civilian service, and they must be subject to CSRS on the day of separation. And there's a 1 out of 2 requirement, and that requirement is the employee must be covered by CSRS for at least 1 year within the 2-year period immediately preceding the separation on which the annuity is based. Now, that 1 year of service does not have to be continuous, but it does have to be covered service. And an employee cannot meet the requirement by paying a deposit for non-deduction service. So when you have John Doe coming into your office with 29 years and he knows that he has unused sick leave on record and he wants to use one of those years to become eligible to retire, send John Doe back to his office because he's not eligible. He has to wait that year out. So you cannot use non-deduction service to qualify yourself to apply for retirement. Okay. All right. So this it talks about the voluntary retirement under CSRS, and it is the two requirements that have to be met in order for someone to be eligible to retire. So an individual must be age 55 with at least 30 years of service, age 60 with at least 20 years of service, or age 62 with 5 years of service. Okay, the employee has to meet the age and the service requirements. There's no combining the two to equal a certain number for them to retire. The age and the service requirement to be eligible to apply for retirement. If someone is requesting the alternative annuity, those elections are available to those individuals who elect an optional retirement and who have a life-threatening illness. Okay, let's talk about disability for a second. Disability under CSRS, an individual can be any age as long as that individual has served at least 5 years of federal service. Now, in regards to a National Guard technician who loses status as a uniformed member of the National Guard due to medical reasons, failure to meet physical standards or age, they must separate from the National Guard position. Now, if the loss of member status is due to disability, that employee may apply for disability retirement. If OPM finds the individual not disabled for the civilian position, they will be automatically eligible for an administrative disability retirement, which is adjudicated the same as a regular disability case, provided they have 5 years of civilian service. And in this case, the employee cannot be appointed to another position in federal government. I'm sorry, I didn't view the slide. 1 second. Okay, now this is the screen that I talked about, voluntary retirements. A person has to meet age and service retirement, and it gives you the age and the service, the years of service that an individual has to meet. And this is the disability scale. Age and service requirements is any age, 5 years of service. Now let's talk about early outs and discontinued service. Okay, so if someone was applying for a visa or is participating in an early out, they must have the approval authority from OPM for an early out. Now, on the actual SF 2801, there is a box in the agency checklist, block K. You need to annotate the authority in which was released to the agency to roll out that early out. Now, the annuity is reduced by 1/6 of 1% for each full month, which equates to 2% per year, if any, for every year that the employee is under the age of 55. Okay, the requirement is a little bit different under FERS. We're going to talk about that when I talk about FERS. Okay, so for discontinued service retirements, they're involuntary types of retirements and given to someone who has an unavoidable reason that they would lose their position and will be able to take an early involuntary retirement. Now, a few reasons someone would be or would qualify for a DSR would be if they were reassigned outside of the local commuting area. As long as the employee has not signed a mobility agreement, they will probably be offered a DSR. If their job was being abolished, that would be a reason. Disability or illness, if the employee is removed by adverse action or equivalent procedures, would be a reason. If the agency is going through a RIF and that individual is RIFed, they would be probably offered a DSR. Now, there are more reasons an employee would be offered a DSR, and a list of other reasons are located in Chapter 44 of the CSRS and FERS handbook, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with. It is our Bible. Well, I shouldn't say it's our Bible, but it's one of our reference points that we will look into if we were to have questions about certain topics regarding retirement. We would use the CSRS and FERS handbook. Okay, we ask that agencies include supporting documents with the package, which includes the OPM Form 1510, which is a certification of agency offer of position and required documentation. And also, we need you to attach a copy of the letter to the employee explaining the DSR requirements. Okay, that usually comes to Benefit Officers Liaison Development. Your liaison will look over the information and determine whether or not the DSR should be approved or not, and send it back to the retirement benefits specialist or the benefits officer at the agency. Okay, now let's talk about special retirement provisions, and that this includes law enforcement officers, firefighters, air traffic controllers, and military reserve technicians. Okay, so law enforcement officers and firefighters have a mandatory separation age of 57. Individuals falling into this category must be separated on the last day of the month in which they reach age 57 if they're still in a LEO firefighter position and if they have at least 20 years of LEO fighter fire service. Now, for air traffic controllers, they have a mandatory separation age of 56, and they must be separated even if they do not acquire sufficient years of air traffic controller service to qualify for retirement under the special provisions. Air traffic controllers must be exempt until age 61 at the request of the Secretary of Transportation of Defense. And if the employee wants exemption past this age, they must submit a request to the Chief of the Retirement Policy Division. Okay, you can find all this information in chapter 46 of the CSRS and FERS handbook. And I'm going to throw out reference points just in case you guys don't know exactly where to find that information in the CSRS and FERS handbook. Okay, so we're still talking about, let me go back here. These slides, man. Okay, so let's talk. We're still talking about law enforcement officers, firefighters, air traffic controllers, and military reserve technicians. Now, someone that falls under these provisions should be 50 years of age, at least 20 years of service. That's for law enforcement officers, air traffic controllers. Now, military reserve technicians kind of fall under the same voluntary retirement rules as a regular service employee. Okay, if a military reserve technician loses a status, meaning the civilian side of their job or the military side, then they have to resign from or have to retire from the program altogether. Okay, now we're going to talk about FERS. Okay, FERS is the newer of the two systems. Okay. Now, under FERS, the minimum requirements are that the federal employees retirement, well, FERS stands for the Federal Employees Retirement System, which we call FERS, and it was enacted on January 1st of 1987. It has become the primary retirement system for federal employees. Usually when I speak to groups of individuals and I ask, are there any CSRS individuals that fall under the CSRS? There's usually maybe one or two individuals in a crowd of 100 or 200 people. So I'm seeing for myself that CSRS employees are a little bit scarce. They're still out there, but they don't make up the population like FERS does. Okay, so the eligibility requirements under FERS is the individual must have at least 5 years of credible civilian service. And but there's no 1 out of 2 requirement under FERS as there is under CSRS. Thus, an employee who elects to transfer to FERS does not have to be under FERS for 1 year to be eligible to retire. The employee does not have to be in a position subject to FERS as long as they meet the requirements. And those requirements are, I'm working with 2 slideshows, you guys, so bear with me in the transition. Okay, so voluntary retirement. Okay, it starts at age 55 and gradually increases to 57, depending on when an employee was born. Okay, so 1953 to 1964, the minimum retirement age will be age 56. And after 1970, the MRA will be 57. So looking at this chart here, the minimum retirement age, which is MRA, which is what that stands for, if someone meets their minimum retirement age and have at least 30 years of service, then that individual would be eligible to retire. Okay, if someone is age 60 years with 20 years of service, they would be eligible. And of course, someone who's age 62 with 5 years of service would also be eligible. Okay, and then we have what we call an MRA plus 10, this last bullet here on the slide. Okay, if an individual retires on the MRA plus 10 provision, the annuity supplement is not payable. The reduction is already in place for these case types, which is a 5% reduction for each year the individual is retiring under age 62. Okay, it's not the minimum retirement age, it's age 62. So for every year that the individual is under age 62 and under this provision, the individual is going to be reduced for every year. And it is a permanent reduction. Okay, now I'm talking about disability under FERS. Now you could, under FERS, an individual could be any age as long as he or she has committed to or served at least 18 months of federal service. Unlike under FERS, it was 5 years. So 18 months is enough to apply for a disability retirement. And the same is true here regarding administrative disability retirement. Just as under FERS, employees are required to have that 18 months of civilian service versus that 5 years. Trying to get this cursor down to the other screen is a little bit difficult. Okay, so let's talk about early outs and discontinued service under FERS, which is the same under CSRS and FERS. Okay, so looking at the chart here, an individual could be age 50 with 20 years of service to participate in a buyout or an early out, or they can be any age with 25 years of service, okay? There's no annuity reduction in a FERS annuity for an employee who retires on an early voluntary retirement under the age of 55, okay? If the employee has completed at least one calendar year of FERS service, a retiree annuity supplement is payable to an employee retiring on an early voluntary retirement when he or she reaches their MRA. So if they were retired at age 50 and their minimum retirement age is 57, at 57, that's when that annuity supplement would kick in for that employee. Trying to work with this cursor. Come on. Okay, here we go. Okay. Transferees with the service component. Now, if a retired employee is under age 55, the service portion of the basic annuity is reduced by 1/6 of 1% for each full month, which equates to 2% per year. If the employee is under age 55. So the annuity rate on this portion, which means the service portion of the benefit, will not increase when the annuitant reaches age 55. And no reduction will be applied to the first portion of the transferee's annuity. So you have those two areas to cover, CSRS and FERS. CSRS will receive the reduction for age, FERS does not. Okay, discontinued service. Like I said, under CSRS, we need you to include supporting documents, just as you would under CSRS. Be sure to include the OPM Form 1510 and the letter to the employee explaining the details of the DSR case. Okay. Okay, let's talk about special retirement provisions under FERS. Slides are driving me nuts. Okay, so just like under CSRs, you have law enforcement officers, firefighters, you have air traffic controllers, and you have military reserve technicians. Now, unlike CSRS, law enforcement officers and firefighters, employees under special retirement provisions can retire at any age with 25 years of service under FERS. That doesn't exist under CSRS. Okay, an exemption from mandatory retirement after age 60 must be determined by the agency head or the chief retirement policy advisor. And air traffic controllers, they have a mandatory separation age of 56 as long as they have 20 years of service, and the president may exempt mandatory age if he feels it's in the public's interest to do so. Okay, so there's an additional authority that comes along with staying on board after the minimum age under air traffic controllers. Provision. Okay, so 1 second, guys. I'm doing too much here. These slides. Okay. Now, in previous years, when I taught this section of this presentation, I used to pass out folders that entailed most of the forms associated with the retirement application process. Since addressing errors from the monthly retirement application audit, I felt it necessary to go over each form block for block so that participants walked away with the knowledge of knowing the exact expectations of what OPM needed from the agencies regarding application submissions. In the essence of time, today we will only talk about the important areas we find exclusively important to discuss. Now, I've had conversations with quite a few of the headquarters level benefits officers in recent months. And in those conversations, I was always asked about the possibility of OPM implementing a fully electronic retirement application process. Most of you find great benefit in moving in that direction of ridding ourselves of paper copies and wet signatures. And I am totally in agreement with you. Given the virtual world we are in post-COVID, but I am uncertain how soon or if that will happen anytime soon. I hope that one day we will be able to make this a fully functional process. Last year, at the height of the pandemic, OPM Retirement Services tested an electronic application process that I thought went over very well. I'm hoping that we finally move into the 21st century fully and implement an all electronic process. I believe that it would simplify the processes already in place regarding retirement application submissions. The application that was designed seemed pretty well developed and would eliminate sending paper documents along with wet signatures and the likes. I'm not sure what came of that test group, but I hope to someday have it fully implemented. For those of you who have taken this training course in the past, you know that I have always sided on the air of the agency and benefits officer, and that there should be a dispute resolution process to the monthly audit. My opinion, and this is only my opinion, is that we, meaning the OPM, have committed to posting agency results on the OPM website each month, and I feel that there should be a process for the agencies to right the wrongs that are charged to them each month. I've worked with a few benefits officers in testing a silent dispute resolution process, and I've even gone a step further and shared those results with RS managers. I wanted to give the agencies a safe place to express their interests and concerns about the audit results each month. On numerous occasions, benefit officers have sent what they thought was proof of erroneous charges against them for me to review. And during many of those reviews, I have agreed with the agency that some of the data that was being reported as unhealthy shouldn't have been charged against the agency and should have been given the opportunity to have the monthly reporting corrected. The audit should be fair and equitable on both ends, not just one. I have always said this, and I still stand by my thoughts on this subject. It has to weigh out the agencies. If you're being charged and being put on blast on the OPM website, I believe there should be a correction process. And that's just my opinion. Having said that, let's get into the retirement application itself. Okay. So, man. 1 second, you guys. Okay, let's talk about the CSRS application. Hold on 1 second. Okay, so the CSRS application is the SF 2801, which is the application for immediate annuity. Application for immediate retirement. Okay, all parts of the application are important and all application sections must be completed. Okay, so the latest version of the CSRS application is dated June of 2013. If your agency is using any forms that are predated before June of 2013, please rid your offices of them now, as they do not have all the pertinent information needed to fulfill the application process. Okay, now let's go over a few of the sections. I know you don't have the forms in front of you, but I'm going to go over a couple of the sections now. In SF 2801 sections A through D, you have section A, which is the identifying information. We need this information. This is how we identify the actual application and who it belongs to. We need to annotate the federal service in section B, and other claim information in section C. Section D is the insurance information. We need all these sections filled out completely. No whiteouts, no scratch outs. It needs to be a clean form with the correct information. Okay. Section
30 or so.
I'm sorry. Is someone asking a question? I heard some talk. Anyway, that SF 2801 sections E through I. Okay, section E is marital information. All blocks should be completed, and make sure that the employee annotates the spouse's social security number and not the employee's social security number. In the past, this is one of the issues with the retirement application. The employee, and it's probably an honest mistake, they would include their social security number versus their spouse's social security number, and we absolutely need the spouse's social security number and not yours annotated twice. So be mindful when you look at applications, make sure you have 2 different social security numbers, one for the spouse and one for the employee. There are some instances where applications have the employee's social security number annotated and not the spouse's. And I reiterate that because you have to differentiate between the 2. It has to be 2 different social security numbers. Also, you must provide a copy of the marriage license. Come on, cursor. Also, if a court order and/or amendments to that court order have not already been submitted to OPM, this information should be attached to the application. Okay, in section F is the annuity election. Only 1 election is permitted. And if an employee is divorced on or after May 7th of 1985, a copy of the divorce decree is necessary if it discusses retirement benefits. If the election is less than the maximum survivor annuity, employees must complete the SF 2801-2, which is a spousal consent form. It must be signed in the presence of a notary and have the seal. You want to make sure that the election on the application matches the election on the SF 2801-2 on the spousal consent form. They have to They have to be cohesive. They have to be the same. If the election is an insurable interest annuity, you want to provide medical documentation that they're in good health, and you want to show that the individual is providing financial dependence on the employee. Okay, Section G, the information about your unmarried dependent children. You want to list all unmarried dependent children under the age of 18 or those incapable of self-support that are over age 18. And if they're disabled, the disability documents must have been approved prior to the child's 18th birthday. Section H, and let me move your slide here. Section H is effective March 1st of 2013. Retired individuals must choose an electronic option, either direct deposit or a direct express debit MasterCard. I think the OPM is trying to do away with paper checks. We're trying to move into an all electronic process in this aspect of the application process. Okay. Income tax information. If the employee wants the same rate that is being withheld from their payroll, they can attach the W-4 that is on file with the employing agency. If the employee wants a different rate, they can attach a new W-4P and submit it with the application. And if they do nothing at all, then OPM will apply the withholding rate of married with 3 exemptions, which is the default. Okay, and then Section I, which is the applicant's certification. Signatures are required in all cases. And I'll repeat that. Signatures are required in all cases. And this is the employee certifying that the information on the attached schedules are accurate. So we need that signature. A lot of benefits officers or HR specialists highlight this area and make sure that it is signed, because without a signature, OPM is not going to start processing that claim. It will sit to the side until we get a signed copy of that application. So it's always great to do this and get the signatures the first time instead of not having it on the document, instead of OPM and having it sat on for some time. So I'll just repeat one more time. Make sure the SF-2801 is certified with a signature from the applicant. One second, this cursor's driving me nuts. Come on. Doesn't want to participate today. Okay, here we go. Okay, let's talk about schedules A, B, and C. Schedule A is military service information. Schedule B is military retired pay. And then Schedule C is federal employees compensation information. So all periods of credible active military service must be documented with a D-214 reflecting the character of service performed. And of course, we only recognize honorable active duty service. And that also includes general discharges because they are honorable and treated as such. Okay, so if someone submits a D-214 that is dishonorable, what do? You say thank you for your service and send them on their way because we cannot use that service. You want to make sure there is a DD-214 attached to the application. OPM is looking for copy number 4, which has the bottom portion of the form filled out, giving the character of service, and you're looking for honorable active duty or general discharge. If there is any labels other than that, you might want to do some homework and research to see if that coding or if that label is an honorable discharge. Okay, you might call the branch of service just to find out, or look in your service first handbook to see if that type of discharge would be honored by federal civilian service. Okay, so if an employee is waiving military retired pay, please include a copy of the memorandum or correspondence sent from the branch of service the employee retired from. OPM needs to see that. Okay, you can attach that to the application. One second, let me get these slides. Okay, all posts, one second. If an employee is waiving, at least 60 days prior to retirement, the employee must submit a letter to their branch of service informing them that they want to waive their military retired pay, and a copy of that letter must be attached to the application, and I just said that. Okay, if claiming combat incurred disability or reserve retired pay, verification must be included. And if the post-56 deposit and IRR was not sent to OPM, you must submit it with the retirement package so that it is not eliminated. So you just want to make sure that is documented and added to the case before you send it to payroll. Okay. 1 second, you guys, sorry. Okay, here we go. Okay, now let's talk about FERS, the SF 3107. Okay. Okay, so the standard form 3107, again, all parts of the application are important. All applicable sections must be completed. The latest version of the FERS retirement application was posted on the OPM website in May of 2014. And just like the CSRS application, if you're using any predated forms before this date, discard them now and only utilize the latest version. Okay, sections A through D, same as the CSRS application. Identifying information, you're going to annotate the federal service, marital information, the annuity elections. It's the same process. And again, the social security number for the employee must not be the same as the spouse's. And that is the one thing I want to point out in this section. Okay. Sections E through I. Same thing. Section E is insurance information. Section F is other claim information, and Section G is information about your unmarried dependent children. It is the same information. If the dependent child is over 18, you must provide that medical documentation and other paperwork to show that they are incapable of self-support, if that is the case. Okay, and then Section H, the payment instructions. An employee has to sign up for a direct deposit. Ooh, what am I doing? If the employee has to sign up for a direct deposit or receive a direct express debit MasterCard unless they live sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. Unless they live outside the United States. I was trying to get my slides together. So if the employee wants the same rate, same thing, they can attach the W-4 that is on file, or if the employee wants to claim something different, they can submit a W-4P, same as under CSRS. Okay, you want to ensure the employee signs and dates and validated with a signature. Okay, so that goes for both CSRS and FERS. You have to have a signature. And these slides are driving me nuts, man. Okay. Now, let's talk about some additional forms. Okay, we're going to talk about insurance forms. Okay, we have the SF 2809, which is the health benefits election form. We have the SF 2818, which is the continuation of life insurance coverage as an annuitant or compensationer. And we have the SF 2823, which is a designation of beneficiary form. If the employee is in an HMO and will be moving outside the commuting area, the employee can submit a form for OPM to process. Also, if the employee will be making an open season change, the employee should complete the form and submit it along with the retirement application. And the employee office should not process the form. Put the form and the open season sheet on the very top of the case so that it is the first thing OPM sees. Okay. The latest copy of this form is dated November of 2014. And if your agency has copies of dated before November 2014, throw them out. SF 2018, this is the form that the employee completes regarding their life insurance. If they want to decrease their insurance or cancel it in retirement, this is the form that they will complete. Okay, every block must be answered regarding options A, B, and C. And the latest form is dated February of 2012 and is the latest version on the OPM website. Okay, so SF 2823, if the retired employee wants to change their designation for their life insurance, this is the form they would use, and the latest version of that form would be dated May of 2014. Okay, I want to save you guys from doing additional work. Just have the latest form so that no information is left off. Okay, other forms. Okay, we have the W-4P, which I just mentioned, which is a withholding certificate for pensions or annuity payments. You can draft them, the individual can draft a memo regarding their state taxes. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. It could be just a couple of lines stating where they wanted their state taxes to be contributed to. And then, of course, we have the designation of beneficiary forms, which are the 2808 SF 2808, which is the surge form, and then the SF 3102, which is the FERS form. If the employee wants to change his or her federal tax election to something different from what they have on file already, they submit a new form with the new election on the W4P, and they can obtain that form on the IRS.gov website. If the employee does nothing, OPM withdraw it as if they elected merit with 3 allowances. Okay, so you want to, I guess, in counseling sessions, you want to just mention what they want to do with their state taxes and allow them to set that in motion themselves by providing a memorandum. Okay, so designation of beneficiary forms. If the employee wants to change whom they want to leave their money to, they can complete this form. There must be 2 witnesses. Neither can be an individual they are leaving the benefits to, and the shares must be indicated on the form, and they must equal 100%, and it must be signed by someone from the HR office before the form is effective. Now, the latest copies of the 2808 is dated June of 2011, and the FERS form, which is the SF 3102, is dated February of 2012. And the employee has a responsibility to ensure that he or she has submitted a complete retirement package. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some of the responsibilities. If I can get the slide up. We'll talk about some of the responsibilities. First, we're going to start with the agency HR office responsibilities. Okay, so part of your job is making sure that an employee is eligible to apply for retirement. And that's the very first step in the process of conducting retirement counseling. Once you determine that an employee has met all the eligibility requirements, please review the retirement information. The employee submits to ensure that all sections are completed and signed correctly. Now, I've heard HR specialists and benefits officers say that they have to hold the hands of these applicants through the entire process, but you have to realize that HR specialists, we know the process, and a regular FERS or service employee, a lot of individuals don't use this information until it's time to really retire. They probably pay attention to the age and service requirement, but when it comes to the rules and regulations of retiring, I would recommend that you hold the hands of those individuals just because of the audit. You don't want to get dinged on the audit, so if you hold their hand, you're making sure that the retirement application process is a smooth process, and you're making sure that all the blocks are filled in, you're making sure they're signed and all the social security numbers are correct. You holding the hand of the of those individuals applying kind of works in your favor as far as the audit is concerned. Come on. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about reviewing official personnel folder. Okay, so you want to remove all the health insurance forms, which are the SF 2809s and the 2810s. And you're also going to remove all the life insurance forms, which could be the 176, the 176T, the 2817, and the 2823. Now, under FEHB, the health benefits registration form and the notice of change in health insurance, you want to go through the OPF and remove all those benefits forms. And if the employee had been covered under their spouse's plan for a period of time, you need to request a copy of the form from their spouse's employing agency. In lieu of the 2809, we meaning OPM, we accept screenshots of online FEB enrollment reports documenting 5 years of service. If you have the EOPF, print the forms from the EOPF. If you are printing screenshots, make sure it shows the old plan as well as the new plan and all of the effective dates under that 5-year tenure in the FEHB program. All of the effective dates associated with each change within the coverage periods. This is the single most common error in the retirement application audit. We will be discussing this more in depth when I get to the audit section of the presentation, but this is like the number one. I believe there's like 183 errors. I think this, it may not, don't quote me on the number, but I believe there's 100 some odd errors in this one particular area. And it made me think, because I've been doing this class for several years, the way that I communicate this particular error, I want to hone in on those effective dates. Okay, you want the old codes. You want to annotate. You want to have your documentation annotate the old codes, the new codes, and all of the effective dates in between that 5-year period. Okay, if we don't get all of that, you're going to be dinged in this spot. I want to actually hone in on this error because it's been in existence since 2009. I believe it got a little bit better in 2016 when I stopped managing the audit, but I believe it's time. It's time for this one error to come out of the first place. Okay, so make sure you have the old code, the new codes, and all of the effective dates in that 5-year period. If it does not have those effective dates, please find the effective dates or find a screenshot where you can print out the effective dates to submit this with OPM and the retirement application, okay? That is my advice to you. I want to bring that out of the cloud of being the #1 error because it has been in existence for way too long. Okay. Also, the alternative would be sufficient payroll records, or you can contact the carrier to fax the latest enrollment information or verify enrollment date and document the contact you spoke with in your payroll office. Okay. Now for FEGLI, you want to go through the OPF or the EOPF and remove all the life insurance forms. If no forms are on file, you want to provide copies of the SF50s to support that the employee has been covered by life insurance. And I believe these were the two top errors for a period of time, but I believe the FEGLI error, the rate has gone down. So we're doing a lot better with FEGLI, but I want to tackle the FEHB error and bring that out of the #1 spot. Okay. Okay. So also health and life insurance are the two biggest problems that we have. And I just said that with the retirement package. There's been some improvements with the FEGLI proofs of coverage, but the FEHB proof of 5 years coverage remains the #1 error made in retirement application audit. Okay. And I'm going to drill this in your head a couple more times at the end of the presentation, but I want you guys to hone in on that and try to submit your applications with all of those effective dates, because I believe the effective dates is actually where the actual error is occurring. I actually had a conversation with someone in our retirement operations center, and she explained to me that they will annotate the old code and the new code. They will maybe annotate one effective date, but they need all of the effective dates in that 5-year period. Okay. Now, we're still talking about reviewing the official personnel folder. I'm trying to get here we go. Okay. So you're going to remove the designation of beneficiary forms under FERS. You're going to remove the DD-214 and other military information and develop the retirement calculation and submit it with the application. Okay, the designation of beneficiary form for CSRS should already be on file with OPM, and if the employee completed one. If you are unsure, you can always have the employee to complete another form. We want all designation of beneficiary forms that are on file in the OPF or the EOPF. Okay, so the DD-14, all of them must be submitted, especially if there's more than one period of service. So if an individual has more than one period of service, we need to see, and if they're claiming credit for those two or three periods of service, we need those DD-214s all in the file. Okay, we will also like the most recent retirement calculation that was completed for the employee. And although OPM does not do calculations for agencies, our processors do run the estimate through OPM systems to make sure that the amounts are correct before issuing payment to an annuitant. So you just want to, I think I have something on my desk right now asking about computation. But I'll say this one more time. OPM does not do the calculations for the agency, but what we do is run it through our system to make sure that it's aligned properly with what the agency comes up in their computerized system. All right. Okay. Here we go. Okay, let's talk about the Certified Summary of Federal Service. Okay, for CSRS, the SF2801-1, and then for FERS, it's the 3107-1. Section A and B, Section A, identification, Section B, verified service history, documentation in the official records. All periods of credible civilian and military service must be listed on this form. List if the post-56 military deposit has been paid in full, and you should accommodate that with an annotated IRR stating paid in full and the date that transaction happened. Okay, all OWCP periods for FERS employees subject to OWCP must be included on the form as well. Okay, still talking about the Certified Summary of Federal Service in sections C, D, and E. Section C, details of civilian service not subject to contributory retirement system for civilian federal employees. Section D, which is the agency certification, and Section E, which is the employee certification. Okay, so this section is for the listing of the Federal Insurance Contributions Act, which is FICA only positions. Okay, you want to list those on this section so OPM is notified that no contributions were paid under these types of appointments, and any other federal civilian service not subject to the retirement system, including DC government retirement system, should be included here if someone had DC government service. Okay, Section D, which is the agency certification. The form must be completed. You must provide a telephone number, a fax number, and email address so we, meaning OPM, will be able to contact you if additional information is needed. It's very important that we have your contact information, and we particularly would like the name and information on the exact processor at the agency that worked the case, because if OPM has any questions, they can come directly to you, ask the questions, and push the case along. Okay, so that's why it's very important. Section E is the employee certification. This is a required signature. If the employee is claiming additional service, a signed statement is also necessary. If they feel it necessary, they can provide a statement. And if service complete a note that states service verified with the employee is sufficient. Okay, you just want to make sure it's filled out properly. And again, no whiteouts, no scratch outs. Just have a clean form so the OPM have no questions. I lose the arrow just with this cursor. Okay, here we go. Agency checklist. Both checklists need to be attached to the retirement package. So you have the Schedule D, and it's on both the retirement forms, CSRS SF2801 and the FERS 3107. So if the employee is retiring under a VERA, you want to make sure that the OPM authority number is included on the application. And I believe I said that is on the agency checklist, block K. Okay, we need that OPM authority. Okay, also, you want to make sure you include the submitting office number. Okay, this is the number that OPM uses for the audit so that we know which agency the application was received from. If you do not know your submitting office number, you can obtain it from your headquarters level benefits officer or your supervisor. The listing is located on the OPM website under the retirement tab. We have all of the benefits officers listed on the OPM website. Okay. If the employee is retiring under a special retirement provision, such as law enforcement officer, air traffic controller, etc., the agency certification establishing eligibility must be included. That is an important piece to that process for those that fall under those special provisions. Okay, so I'm giving you all the details on how to have a healthy retirement case. I hope you guys are taking good notes and remembering the information because it's very important. I need a whole segment just to get the cursor down. Okay, here we go. Okay, still talking about the agency checklist, the employee office checklist of necessary forms for the retirement case. Okay, this is just a guide to assist you to ensure that all the paperwork is included with the retirement package. This does not have to be sent to OPM. You can keep it with the copy of the retirement package that you keep for the agency, which I hope you're doing. Keep a copy just in case we have questions, because there's no way you're going to process all the applications that you do and remember every detail of every application. So keep a copy in case OPM has a question and they call you. You can always look it up. Okay, here we go. Additional forms. SF2819, which is the Notice of Conversion Privilege, the SF2821, which is the agency certification of insurance status, and of course the OPM Form 1510, which is the certification of agency offer of position and required documentation for discontinued service retirement under CSRS and FERS. Okay, so you want to complete the SF2819 for all employees that had life insurance when they retired. Like I said before, the latest version is dated May 1995. You want to also complete the 2821 for all retired employees that have life insurance. That's also dated May of 1995. And you want to complete the OPM Form 1510 when the employee is being separated for discontinued service retirement. And that is dated October of 1994. Now, these forms haven't been updated because they still have all of the pertinent information that you need or required to submit to OPM. So they haven't been updated since 1995. And it's perfectly okay because the form works. Okay. Okay, cursor, come on here. I just there you go. Come on, come on. Come on, here we go. I'm fighting with this cursor today. Okay, so we want to talk about assembling the package. Okay, so like I just said, we want you to make a copy for your files. You want to provide a copy to the retiree, and you want to submit the original retirement package to your payroll office to be sent to OPM. Okay, so we are requesting that you two-hole punch the case and do not staple them. This is a personal requirement of OPM because of the way that they disperse the application. Certain parts go to certain sections, and it's easier to work with a two-hole punch than the staple. Okay, so if you could do this for us, that will be appreciated. You want to assemble the package based on the guidelines that was distributed in the Healthy Case BAL. Now, I want you to write this down, the BAL 12-103. Okay, that will give you all the details on how to submit a healthy retirement application packet. Okay, the BAL addresses rules for application submissions during COVID. These guidelines must be followed until OPM issues something different. That BAL is BAL 20-102, which is labeled Temporary Changes to Retirement Application Processing while operating under coronavirus disease telework policies. Okay. This BAL includes directions on how to submit retirement application packages to your payroll centers using an electronic process and or by using OPM Secure Dropbox. The procedures are outlined in the BAL, and you can find it on the OPM website. Okay, now let's talk about some of the payroll responsibilities, some of the things that payroll does in the process. Okay, I hope you all have a good contact and possibly a great connection to your payroll providers. If there are any issues with cases you submit through your payroll providers, you should be able to call, email, text, smoke signal, whatever you do to communicate existing issues with cases you have sent through your payroll provider to get to OPM. During COVID, we have seen quite a bit of issues with cases not going into interim pay in a timely fashion. Your first point of contact should be your payroll providers to get the register number the case went out on and to be able to check with OPM to see if the case was submitted properly. So if you're experiencing delays, check your payroll office first before going to your liaison to check up on the case and obtain the register number so that we can check with retirement operations to see what exactly is going on with the case or if we have even received the case. Okay, so that direct link between you and payroll needs to be a good one. So establish that communication with them. That way you have that the lines of communication open. Okay, agency payroll responsibilities. Payroll will review the package for completeness. They will review the work history and verify pay adjustments, promotions, etc. And they will certify sick leave. Okay, they must certify the history and retirement contributions. They certify unused sick leave for CSRS, CSRS offset employees. For FERS employees, and this is probably an old note. They had in 2013, in NDAA 2010 allowed FERS employees to start contributing 50% of their unused sick leave to the, tack on at the end of their careers. But then they came in the very next year when FERS FRAE was implemented under that same NDAA 2010. They authorized 100% of unused sick leave. It was made available to FERS employees through that act. Now the SF 2806 and the SF 3100A, which is the individual retirement record, must be submitted within 30 days of the employee's separation. If the employee has paid for post-56 military service, you must submit an IRR for that as well. As I stated before, it should be marked paid in full, which includes the date. Okay, we're still talking about agency payroll responsibility, the SF 2801 and SF 3107. Section B, which is a payroll office checklist. We want your payroll center to answer all applicable questions. And they also need to sign block 12 on the SF 2801, and on the SF 3107, they would sign block 13. Those signatures are very important. Come on, cursor. There has to be some kind of magical way to do this, but I'm not finding it today. Okay, here we go. Okay, the agency payroll's responsibility is to close out the retirement card. They are to submit information to OPM, and they also pay a lump sum of annual leave. And they also respond to inquiries from OPM and personnel that have questions about the system, about the process of the retirement application, which is why I always tell you guys to establish a great connection with your payroll centers. A lot of individuals, a lot of agencies don't have that close-knit relationship, and they should. That way, your processes, and I'm not going to say your processes are going to be smoother, but when issues occur, you'll have someone to talk to before you come to OPM to inquire. Okay. You got to complete the retirement package. You want to make sure the package is in the order that is outlined in the Healthy Case BAL. You want a copy of the 2819 should be included, or at least the block on the SF 2821 has to be checked to show that the SF 2819 has been completed and given to the employee. The dates on the forms must match. Okay, so this is complete. This is not the order, but these are some of the documents that we need to see in the retirement file if it applies to the applicant. The retirement application, the certified summary, health benefits forms, life insurance forms. The agency checklist, the annuity estimate that you guys are going to provide, W-4P if the individual has one, the statement regarding the state tax if it applies, the DD-214, if the individual has military service, and the IRR, which I don't think you can see on your screen, but the IRR, I want you to add that to that list. Okay, states where taxes are not withheld is Alaska, Florida, Nevada, New Hampshire, South Dakota, Texas, Tennessee, Washington State, and Wyoming. And they can go to irs.gov to get the state tax forms and provide them during the retirement counseling session to be included in the retirement package or the retirement package. Okay, let's talk about OPM responsibilities. We have a responsibility, a great responsibility in the process of a retirement application. Okay, now, if I can get this cursor down here. Here we go. Come on, here we go. There we go. There we go. Okay, now let's talk about the Data Exchange Gateway. The Data Exchange Gateway is a network for payroll offices to send electronic data sets to OPM's retirement program. Hard copies are then sent to the Retirement Operations Center once the data is transmitted. Now, from the information loaded, it generates an ID card. It transfers into health insurance. It generates the case file forms and labels and authorize initial interim pay. The payroll office normally submits the hard copy register of separation and employees' records to the Retirement Operations Center in a time frame of the same day it transmits the DEG to several days after it transmits. Okay, so this is where payroll and OPM connects. This is their piece to the puzzle, DEG. Okay, once the retirement information is received, OPM will provide the civil service annuity number, which is the number that the annuitant will always use to inquire about their retirement. You want to place the individual in interim pay status, and the goal, OPM's goal is between 7 and 10 days after the receipt of the package from your payroll center. They screen and or develop the retirement claim to produce a healthy case, and then they adjudicate the claim. Okay, let's talk about the process. Okay, so retirement information received via electronic file, the claim number is assigned, and this is what we call the CSA number. A hard copy application package arrives, the case is assembled into OPM's desired order, a file search is completed for missing service if needed, and interim pay is authorized. Okay, and then the case is sent to the development section for screening. Okay, so now the SF 2806 and the 3100, which are the application to make deposit or redeposit under CSRS and FERS, are sometimes not received together with the retirement application, or copies are submitted instead where the originals are needed. OPM will start the process using the copies of these records, but the complete process cannot be complete until originals with wet signatures are delivered. And if we're talking about FERCA, which we all are scarce about, FERCA, Federal Erroneous Retirement Coverage Corrections Act. Okay, so OPM sometimes receive cases that are identified as FERCA cases, but no copy of the decision letter is attached to the packages where decisions have been made, causing additional duplicated work to have to be done. You want to make sure your FERCA packets are set up the proper way. And I want to go out on a limb here and remember the number, but I believe it's BAL 04106. I haven't taught FERCA in quite some time, but I believe BAL 04106. And for those of you who are new to the process, these BALs, the numbers mean 04 means that BAL was written in the year 2004, and 106 is just the number of the BAL. But you're going to go to the OPM website, and you can either use a search engine. BAL 04-106 is your FERCA guidance, and it entails everything that needs to happen with your FERCA cases. Don't be scared of FERCA. It's nothing other than a coverage determination going wrong that you need to correct. Okay, making the corrections could be a little difficult to understand, but all of that information is in the BALs. 04106 is making the determination and pushing the case forward to OPM. And then there are other BALs out there that talks about moving the monies around and that sort of thing. But don't be scared of FERCA. These are cases that just need correction. Okay, OPM needs the following information. We need the SF50s correcting the coverage. I'm still talking about FERCA. SF50s correcting the coverage. We need an election letter with employee signature, and we need a copy of the complete packet. Okay. OPM began processing FERCA cases and kept a spreadsheet. I remember I volunteered for that spreadsheet, not knowing what I was getting myself into, but I kept that spreadsheet, and that spreadsheet, that was a busy project because we kept just add-ons. So anyway, we had a spreadsheet of the cases prior to us making the agency responsible for its own production of FERCA processing. Okay, the agency is responsible at this point for conducting the whole process, including the counseling, and you can find those instructions in BAL 04106. Okay, we have to submit the application for the retirement system the employee elected. Okay, and also talking about military deposits, once the military deposit workup is done, send a copy of the earnings and the calculation, even if the individual did not pay the military deposit. An actuarial reduction may be due for unpaid deposits under FERCA. Okay, sometimes days or hours are missing for intermittent service, which are those cases where employees serve when actually employed. These are individuals that only pay for the days they work. We need that annotated. We need that annotated in the retirement application. And sometimes OPM doesn't receive information for the tour of duty for part-time service. These are things that are needed. These are things that are going to hold your cases stagnant until we receive the information, and that is what you do not want. In the last couple of years, benefits officers have been working with our liaisons, which is in benefit officer liaison development, to find out exactly what is missing from cases. And usually what I do is I usually look in the system and find out from Retirement Operations Center what is missing, and I convey it to the agency so that they can get those documents or whatever's needed to retirement operations in a timely fashion so that we can push that case forward. But if you understand what is needed, make sure it's in the case so that when payroll submits it to OPM, that there will be no issues in that case. So just keep moving along. Okay. Still talking about the process. Here we go. Still talking about the process. Interim pay is authorized. The case is sent to the OPM development section for screening, and then the retirement claims are screened and made healthy by the retirement develop section. Healthy cases are sent to the claims section multiple times a day. Okay, so those healthy cases, they just kind of go through them and send them on until complete adjudication. When there are issues, they don't make it to the claims section. So this is what we're trying to avoid. Okay, whatever is not done by the HR specialist, OPM adjudicators have to do what we call develop the case. Develop meaning to provide whatever is missing from the case, or go out and look for whatever is missing from the case to make it whole, to be able to push forward, which holds the case from being processed in a timely manner. So this is why we ask that you all provide clean, healthy, and complete retirement cases to avoid additional work and time spent on cases that are not complete. Okay, let's talk about interim pay. Okay, interim pay is partial annuity payment that is paid out monthly until final adjudication can be processed. It occurs electronically through the data exchange gateway or manually by customer service reps or specialists. A system-generated letter is sent to the retiree informing them that they are being placed into interim pay with the effective date and the amount of the interim pay. Once the information is received at OPM, the system generates that letter to the annuitant and the information provided, and the individual is placed in interim pay. OPM uses agency estimates to provide interim payments to annuitants when they first enter into retirement. Interim pay is an estimated amount to an amount equaling about 80% of what we project to be an individual's final pay. And then once the retirement case is fully adjudicated, interim pay changes to final pay, and any makeup payments are made up in the first payment once the retiree starts to receive their final pay. The annuitant will receive the gross amount from the estimate before health and life insurance are taken out. Okay, just kind of going through the process so you guys understand exactly what it is that OPM does when that case leaves your office. Okay. There you go. Okay, interim pay is based on the information provided by the agency, which is the type of separation, what their final pay is, their date of birth, and their service computation date. Okay, some cases that cannot be placed into interim pay right away or electronically are those that have court orders, those who have refunded service, those that have post 10-182 deposit service, part-time service at the time of retirement, and offset cases. These are cases that don't really immediately go into interim pay. There's some additional work that needs to be done there. And that's why it's held up just a little bit, just to satisfy these areas of the retirement application. Okay. Let's talk about processing goals. Let me get it on the screen here. Okay, processing goals. Okay, our processing goal is 90% of both CSRS and FERS are processed within 60 days. We project that 90% of both CSRS and FERS cases are adjudicated in 60 days, and this goal changes when there are issues with cases. So this is why it is very important for cases to be submitted properly, accurately, and healthy. It holds up our progress to reaching that 90%. And sometimes in the past, we've had backlogs which held up cases, and those backlogs are due to things happening, not because we have lazy processors. Okay, let's go through some common problems. I want to talk about some of the common problems that we have or that we see in this process. Okay, so sometimes we see incomplete retirement packages. You want to make sure that your agency has a review process. If you are the HR specialist handling the case, it's okay to pass it off to a colleague or a supervisor if you're questioning what a process is or something you think is missing from the case. It's better to make sure that it is correct before you guys hit the send button to send it to the payroll. Okay, some cases have incomplete forms and missing information, more specifically omitted signatures. Without a signature, OPM cannot process a retirement claim. Okay, you want to be sure to address non-deduction service, refunded service, military service, and redeposits. You want to talk about military service deposits during your counseling sessions with prospective retirees. And you want to present all pertinent information that will allow an employee to make informed decisions regarding their life and retirement. Okay, we're still talking about common problems. Still talking about common problems. Okay, so the IRR submitted, sometimes the IRR is submitted separately from the retirement package. Sometimes incorrect health benefits and life insurance information is submitted. Remember what I said about FEHB and those providing proof of the 5-year coverage, the 5 years preceding retirement. You want the old codes, you want the new codes, and you want all the effective dates within that 5-year period, and that will save you the trouble of getting dinged for that error. Okay. As I stated previously, FEHB and faded information are the two most popular errors we find in the audit. And like I said before, faded doesn't look as bad as it did in the past, but there are still some errors being recorded. Okay, so let's try to nail that in the next next audit. We're at the beginning of This is the beginning of August. So we gave results for July. So when we get August results, I'm going to be taking a look to see if we nail the FEHB. I want to bring that out of the #1 spot as being the common error, because there's no way this should still be in existence since 2016. Okay. All right, here we go. Okay, so still talking about common problems. FERCA case, it is 04106. You want to be sure to follow BAL 04106. If you follow this BAL, I promise you your FERCA cases will look great and they will not be returned to you. Okay. Also, intermittent WAE time is not documented. We need documentation on WAE time since their tour of duty is completely different than someone like you and I who work a 40-hour work week. The tour of duty for part-time service is sometimes missing. Okay. Some common errors documented in the most previous audits. And I've been looking really at June and July. I did look at April and May, but June and July is what I'm specifically talking about. We would take a look into the retirement application audit in just a few short minutes, and I want to cover the top 7 most popular errors at this point. But some of the errors that I see that are popular, and I'm just going to go through them quickly. You can look at the retirement analysis that was sent to you right before this presentation started. But some of the errors that I saw is 1, the proof of health benefits coverage. It wasn't 180. There was 138 errors in the July audit, which is reported in August. I saw some instances where the 2818 was not signed. We had 94 cases that had the 2818 not signed. The 3107 was not signed, and that's a huge error. You guys should know better not to have a signed application sent to OPM. The 2821 not signed by payroll. The post-56 military deposits are not marked paid in full on the IRR. The FERS 2818 is sometimes missing from the file. There were a few cases that had missing FERS 2818s, and the marriage certificate is not provided if the survivor election is made on the application is another one that I saw was pretty popular. 3107-1 had inaccurate dates and no signature was provided. The IRR for covered service is not included sometimes. The 2821 is not signed by HR, or the 2821 is missing. Okay, but I know these are a lot of little details, but these are things that are going to save you from being dinged on the audit. But those are the ones that I pointed out that had the higher numbers on this audit, the July audit, which was reported in August. Okay, disability. This thing is crazy. Okay, disability. Okay, so to be eligible to apply for disability under CSRS, and I'm trying to get this cursor back. Come on. Let's see. Now let me get it up. 1 second, you guys. Here we go. I just saw it. Let me back this up. What do I say? Okay. Okay, so CSRS. To be eligible to apply for disability retirement under CSRS, you can apply if you are an employee who is any age, as long as you have served 5 years of federal service. You do not have to meet the 1 out of 2 requirement as with the voluntary retirement under CSRS, and the individual must be subject to SERS on the day of separation. Okay, so under FERS, the eligibility requirements is an individual could be any age with at least 18 months of service, and they must be subject to FERS on the day of separation. Okay, so those are the 2 requirements. FERS, they have to have 5 years. FERS, they have to have 18 months, I'm sorry. CSRS, they have to have 5 years, and under FERS, they have to have 18 months of federal service before they can apply for a disability. Okay, documentation in support of disability retirement, which is the application for CSRS and FERS, which is the SF 3112. Okay, so this form is dated May of 2011, which is the latest version that is on the OPM website. The application for immediate retirement must be accompanied with this application. So they're going to submit this SF 3112, and if they're in the CSRS, they're also going to submit the SF 2801, and if they're in the FERS, they're also going to submit the SF 3107. Okay, FERS and SERS offset employees also have to apply for benefits with Social Security. They need to attach a receipt from the Social Security Administration or an award notice. There used to be a program called FEDMER. Okay, I don't know if you guys remember, but there used to be a program called FEDMER that acted as a one-stop shop where an employee could kill 2 birds with 1 brick. Applying for FEDMER and the application details would reach both OPM and Social Security simultaneously. I'm sad to report that FEDMER no longer exists. I just found this out actually just yesterday that it no longer exists. I have been checking periodically, and sometimes it actually came up, but sometimes it wouldn't. And then I found out just the other day that we're about to take the information off the OPM website. So if you see it on the OPM website, it no longer exists. But going back to my original point, if you're applying for Social Security and you're on deferreds, the individual has to apply for both disability with the retirement program and disability with Social Security, and we need to see proof that both of that Social Security was indeed applied for. Now, there is a supervisor statement. Okay, you must attach a position description. We need performance standards and the latest performance appraisal in the disability retirement package. Second. Oh, and we also need specific reasons for leave use. So we need all of this in the packet attached to the 3112. Okay, we're still talking about disability. Okay, in part SF 3112D, the agency certification of reassignment and accommodation efforts, and the SF 3112 Section E is the disability retirement application checklist. Make sure you show what efforts has been made to accommodate the person before submitting the application. Okay, if the disability is not approved, should the employee still be on your payroll when you have certified with the retirement package that the person is no longer able to perform the job and there are no places to reassign the employee or accommodate them? You should then be considering removal due to inability to perform their job. And one of the responsibilities of the supervisor is to take notice of the declination of the performance of that person that's applying for disability and document that and send that in with the retirement package as well. Okay, so there's a plethora of information that needs to follow the retirement application for someone who is applying for disability. And at this point, since FEDMR no longer exists, they're going to have to make that application process for both OPM and Social Security. Okay. Here we go. Okay, so agency responsibilities. Okay, like I said before, you're going to review the applications and information submitted. You're going to complete the certified summary, but do not include an end date. Okay, you're going to make a copy of the package and send the original to OPM via the payroll office. Okay, we're still talking about disability, guys. Okay, at this point, you do not remove anything from the OPF. Okay. It's driving me crazy. Man. There we go. So another payroll responsibility is to send the information out on a register. By sending it to payroll, it helps us to be able to track the application for you as to when it was sent to OPM. Payroll can provide you a register number and the date of the register number. Okay, you can always obtain that from your payroll center. Okay, OPM responsibility. Okay, for preliminary disability, you're going to assign a claim number. You're going to review the case for accuracy. We are going to determine if the employee has an illness that is expected to last for at least 1 year, and we're going to contact the agency with the determination. Okay, our processing goals with disability varies due to the nature of the case. We try to complete them as quickly as we can, depending on how quickly we get the necessary information needed to reach a final decision. And because disability applications have a little bit more to add to them than the regular application, it takes a little bit longer to process. We have individuals in place that make medical determinations that can understand and read medical terms. So the process has been moving a lot smoother since we regrouped and added individuals that are educated and have educated in medicine and have medical terminology or can understand medical terminology. Okay, agency responsibility. You're going to contact the employee to determine effective date of retirement, and then you're going to contact OPM with the last date of pay. You can either fax it to this 202 number, You can email last day to pay at opm.gov. So that's LDOP at opm.gov, or you can phone it in at 202-606-1686. Now, if the employee has sick leave, they can opt to use up all of their sick leave before the retirement is effective. The employee would still have to submit medical evidence for the sick leave. If the employee is on donated leave, it is effective at the end of the pay period the notice is received, and all unused sick leave is returned to the donors. If the employee is on leave without pay, you want to make it effective the end of the pay period when the notification was received. Okay, at that point, we're going to remove all the health insurance forms, the 2809s and 2810s. You're going to remove all the life insurance forms, the 2817, the 2823, the 176, and the 176T. You're going to remove the designation of beneficiary forms, which are the FERS and CSR forms should be on file. And like I said before, they can file a new one if they're not sure. And then, of course, you're going to remove the DD-214 and other military information. I swear this is becoming a little bit agitating that I can't get this cursor to cooperate. So bear with me, I apologize. Not sure where this thing is. Here we go. Okay. Okay, we're still talking about agency responsibility. You're going to review the OPF, remove all the HB, life insurance, and beneficiary forms, and you're going to complete the SF 2821. Okay, now let's talk about payroll responsibility and finalizing the case. Okay, so your payroll's office responsibility is to complete the retirement card. They're going to certify sick leave balances for CSRS, CSRS offset, and FERS. They're going to complete the checklist, and they're going to complete the SF 2821. Okay, OPM responsibility in finalizing the case. Okay, so we're going to place the employee in interim pay. We're going to wait for the final paperwork from the agency, and then we're going to adjudicate the claim. Okay, talk about some disability problems, problems that we see with disability cases. Okay, so one of the things is we see the retiree has refunded service and was not counseled about it. Okay, sometimes the last date of pay is being provided incorrectly, meaning they probably give the wrong date. And the employee is not counseled regarding the difference between optional retirement versus disability retirement. Now, all disability annuitants must pay the redeposit to receive credit for the service in the annuity computation. Whereas with optional retirement, redeposits before 3/1/91 receive full credit, but the annuity is actuarially reduced. Okay, you want to please be sure that the last date of pay is provided correctly. A lot of cases come into OPM without the last date of pay included. Some cases involve an employee accepting donated leave in the middle of the time the employee was on leave without pay. Agencies may credit donated leave retroactively when the employee has been in a leave without pay status. Okay, employees that are approved for workers' compensation are not advised that they must apply for disability retirement within 1 year of being taken off the agency's rolls in the event they are taken off of workers' compensation. So you need to give the employee the proper information so that they'll know what to do when they're out on workers' compensation. The retiree should be counseled on how to use sick leave and if it does or doesn't affect the annuity. We also see incomplete packages impact the evaluation of disability applications. Be sure that disability submissions are complete and accurate prior to submitting to OPM. It is easier for the individual and agency to develop for disability information than it is for OPM to do so, especially since the employee retiring will be expecting a specific turnaround. From the agency perspective, it will change your age of separations report if you submit disability packages that are incomplete or inaccurate. Okay. So now let's talk about early out and discontinued service. Okay, so you're going to follow the same procedures as voluntary retirement. And in addition to this, you're going to submit the OPM authority code on the retirement application, which is the agency checklist, block K. I need you guys to remember that. Block K of the agency checklist. You want to annotate the authority, the OPM authority. And then you want to complete and submit the OPM form 1510, which is a certification of agency offer of position and required documentation. We need to see that form in the file. Oh, no, not yet. Okay, now I'm going to move into the quality audit. Okay, now let's talk about the quality audit. Okay, so what it is a survey conducted to track errors and omissions made by agencies in the submission of their retirement application packages and to improve the quality of their submissions. It is conducted monthly, and we review all cases, both CSRS and FERS, except for deferred and preliminary disability and death cases are not included in the quality audit. So the retirement application audit was suspended during COVID and returned in April of 2021. It is now back to being an active monthly audit. The last audit was completed on July 2021, which those are the results for August. So we're always a month in the rear. So August reporting is discussing July's audit results. Okay, your agency's headquarters level benefits officer should have a copy of the reports for your agency or sub-agency to review. So you can always email or call the benefits officer of your agency to obtain a copy so you can review it. When a case is received in the Retirement Operations Center, the case first goes through a screening process to determine if it is a healthy case. That is ready to be moved into a specialist processing the case. If it is determined that a particular case is not a healthy case, then a checklist will be completed for the case, and OPM will provide agencies on a monthly basis the errors with all the cases that were submitted for the month. This way, the agencies will receive their feedback much sooner on the case, and they should be able to resolve any issues quicker. Now, on the OPM website, I think we only document it's 15, the top 15 or the 15 with the most errors. I'm not sure how that works, but all of those cases aren't annotated on the OPM website. It's only certain cases, and I believe it's only 15 cases that is reported on the OPM website. Okay, so we're still talking about the quality audit. Okay, so these are the audit results for July of 2021, and I know our group provided you with an overall analysis of the audit, and you can make the comparison, but these are just the audit results for the month of July, which was just reported on August 1st. Okay, so the total cases reviewed was 4,568 cases. Out of those 4,568, there was a total number of errors of 986 errors. HR errors, we had 837 HR errors, and payroll errors were 252. The overall accuracy rate was 78.4 accuracy rate. Now, back when I managed the retirement application audit, I believe it was between 2015 and 2017, we had gotten the audit, the rating up to 80 in the 80 percentile, closer to the 90 percentile. And I had implemented what I called audit notes. I'm not sure if you guys remember that, but audit notes entailed all of the errors that were that we saw in the month prior in that audit. And I took those and I used it as an informal training tool for for the benefits officer to disseminate to their specialists that were handling cases. I'm not sure. I don't think that we still do audit notes, but I saw an increase in the audit results when those notes were included in those emails that went out to the benefits officer. I'm not sure if benefits officers thought it was looked at it as a training tool or thought it was beneficial or helpful, but I saw numbers increase when those notes went out because agencies could refer to that email and see the errors that we consider to be the most popular, and they will make corrections in the next audit. So I saw the numbers creep as the audit was being performed. Okay, so the April 2021, the audit came back. The accuracy rate was 86.4. May, the accuracy rate was 83.4. June, the accuracy rate was 79.6. And in this month, the accuracy rate was 78.4. So you see, there was a decline in the numbers, okay? And actually, 78.4 is the lowest accuracy rate I've seen since 2016 when my tenure managing the audit ended. So I would like to see these numbers increase I would like to see these numbers increase. Now, this what's on the screen now are the audit results for June. If I can get my cursor back up here to get to, okay, here we go. 1 second. Okay, so what we see now is the overall results for June, and I just want you to just eyeball the results. We had more cases in June. We had 7,057. Total number of errors was 2,090, and the error rate was 79.6. Okay, this figure changes frequently, and we report these numbers out monthly. Okay, just to show you how the numbers have been declining since it came back. So you guys, you have to pay close attention to what you're submitting to OPM. And I understand that sometimes the charge sheets may charge you something that is not quite the actual error. And I do understand that, and agencies they're using this as a report card. They're using this audit as a report card of how they're doing on their application submission. So it's up to the HR specialist to really pay attention to what's in those applications and what you're submitting to your payroll centers to get to OPM. Okay. All right. Retirement application and common errors, and this is sided with the audit. Okay, we're just going to quickly go through because I think we've discussed some of these, but I just want to quickly go through just to bring home a couple of points. Okay, so the SF 2801 and 3107, you want to make sure you have a signature, no signature or not an original signature in section I, which is the applicant certification. We need a signature, okay? Sometimes the signature page is missing. The employee cannot be placed in interim pay until this is taken care of. So it is up to you to get this right. You want to avoid getting those calls saying, hey, I've retired 3 months ago and I haven't received the payment. These people have bills to pay and they have to live beyond being employed. So it's very important that we pay close attention to what we're submitting, especially having a signature, because if there's no signature, Retirement Operations Center is not going to process that claim. Okay, we're still talking about the 2801 and 3107, the survivor election not specified in the annuity election section, or it conflicts with the spousal consent form. And sometimes a court order question in the marital information section, it must be answered. Sometimes it's left blank, but it has to be answered. Okay, the agency certified record of service, the SF 2801-1 and the 3107-1. Sometimes the service history is missing or incorrect, resulting in an SCD discrepancy. And sometimes the FICA rates are missing. I mentioned this earlier, but I want to bring it home for you guys. The FICA rates are sometimes missing. This could result in a person not being eligible to retire. And we would not pay out benefits and risk overpaying someone or providing a benefit that one is not entitled to. We need the FICA rates to compute the amount of the deposit that is owed, or to know how much to reduce the benefit if the deposit will not be paid. So this is important information. It's something that you guys definitely should hone in on and make sure that it is annotated correctly on the application. Okay, I was still talking about the SF 2801-1 and the 3107-1. Sometimes the part-time tours of duty, as well as intermittent and WAE hours and days are not annotated. And again, it's very important that we get this information because this is a piece of the puzzle that will hold up processing. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, we need contact information for the individual that's processing the claim. Okay, it gives OPM the leverage to be able to call that specialist to ask simple questions about the case so that they can push the case forward. Okay, so please make sure you have your information on the application so that we are be able to communicate with that individual. And if not that individual, someone has to be listed from the office or the agency that has their hands tied into the process of adjudicating retirement claims or submitting retirement applications to OPM. Okay. Also, the agency checklist, early option retirement authority number is not provided. Remember I said it is the agency checklist, block K. You want to make sure you have the OPM authority number there. They want to also include the agency contact information, make sure it's complete. The payroll section is complete. You want to make sure, and probably there's no way for you to check to see if the payroll section is complete. But if there's issues, that's why I say that you should have that direct link with your payroll center so that you can be able to discuss what OPM discusses with you that becomes an issue when in the payroll section. You should be able to communicate that. And then, of course, the submitting office number is not provided, and we need that. That is a piece to the puzzle that that kind of gives you the information you need to know how you did on your retirement cases for the month. Okay. Okay, spousal consent form. Okay, both sections must agree. The spousal consent form for less than full survivor annuity is a common error. Sometimes it conflicts with the application, the annuity election section. Sometimes it's not notarized and the spouse's signature does not match the notary date. All of this information has to be cohesive, because if it's not, it looks a little suspicious and then we start to think other things. So you want to make sure that the spousal consent form is signed if less than full maximum survivor benefit is being issued. It has to be filled out and it has to match the application. Okay, the individual retirement record. Sometimes we see missing service. Missing service is identified on the agency certified record on the IRR, and then sometimes it is missing specific information such as the last date of pay, unused sick leave, or contributions. Okay, so payroll needs to provide last date of pay for disability retirement. Sometimes it doesn't match and can impact the monthly amount received. The tour of duty or hours worked is missing. Again, intermittent time worked, leave without pay is not annotated. SF 3100 for final period of service is sometimes missing. In prior audits, we charge current agencies errors for missing or complete IRRs for service and employee performed at previous agencies. IRR errors, including post-56 deposit IRRs, will only be charged for service with the current agency. Okay, IRR errors from prior agencies will be identified as informational errors. Okay, so you guys won't be dinged on those. It'll be just an informational error. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the designation of beneficiary form, the SF 3102. Okay, sometimes we receive them, they're not signed. Sometimes it does not have two witnesses, and sometimes the shares does not equal to 100%. Okay, since there is no way to determine if the SF 2808, which is the CSRS form, there's no way to tell if it was submitted with the retirement package or if one was already on file. We have removed the error and listed it as an informational error only because of that reason. Okay, 2809. 2809 sometimes is missing proof of the 5 years first opportunity. Again, this is the #1 error, and I want you guys to nail this on the next audit. Old code, new code, and effective dates of in between that 5-year period, that individual was participating in FEHB prior to retirement. We need those effective dates, and I believe that is what's missing from most of those applications that receive errors. Let's ding this next time, you guys. And I know I can't say it enough, but I want to nail this and bring this home so this will not be a problem. Okay, that's why I keep being repetitive about this one error. Okay, let's see what else. Again, this is one of the largest error categories we have found as a result of the audit. Coverage waived after previous being enrolled, the SF 2009 or other documentation sometimes is not included. The coverage is suspended and the individuals don't provide proof of TRICARE or coverage is not included. And then since most are done online, we need a screen print of online FEHB enrollment reports documenting 5 years. Again, old code, new code, and all effective dates dated back at least 5 years is what we're looking for. Okay, and then there are other alternatives is sufficient payroll records to document 5 years. You want to contact the carrier to fax the latest enrollment or verify enrollment date and document the contact that to speak with. There's an EHRI initiative to feed the FEHB enrollments to EOPF directly from the Employee Express and other self-service systems. This information is generally emailed to the headquarters level benefits officer. Okay, now we're going to talk about the SF 2817, which is the election of optional life insurance. They're sometimes missing the proof of 5 years and first opportunity for the life insurance. And like I said before, we've got a little bit better with the life insurance. We want to nail the FHB next, but you need to provide the proof that the individual participated in the life insurance program for at least 5 years or the first opportunity. And if the form's missing, you want to include the SF50s instead of having the missing form. We would like the form, but if you can't find the form, you can include the SF50s, and that will be sufficient. Okay, next is the 2818 post-retirement election of life insurance. Okay, sometimes the form is missing, and sometimes there are conflicts with the life insurance annuitant is allowed to carry into retirement. And we need to see the first year, first opportunity. Now, this is an important document that certifies the annuitant's wishes for continuing basic and optional life insurance into retirement. The most common error with the form is that all 4 blocks are not signed. Even if the employee only had basic, all 4 blocks need to be signed. An original form must be on file to finalize the case. If no original form is on file, the employee is sent a letter including the form requesting that he or she completes the form and return it to OPM within 15 days. And if the form is returned within 15 days, the retiree is finalized with a default for all coverage eligible to continue into retirement. Okay, and that default is a full reduction. Okay, so you just want to make sure you have all the pertinent information so that the claim is complete. Okay, so the next form is the SF2821. If I can get it on the screen. Okay, there we go. Okay, so agency certification of insurance status. Some of the common errors are sometimes the form is missing. Okay, sometimes it conflicts with the life insurance annuitant had at separation. It should match the most recent SF2817 or the SF50. Okay, so they need to match. And you must have dual certification, and it needs to have a signature by HR and payroll. Okay, like I said, when it's sent, you have access to your agency's HR, I'm sure, but when it comes to payroll, you send that file off to payroll, and I'm not going to say you don't think anything about it, but you are in agreement that case is gone to OPM for further processing. But we must have dual certification, and these are things that you should relay to your payroll center, saying make sure you sign these documents because we are deemed on these particular items. Okay, sometimes the 2821 is sometimes not signed by payroll, by HR, and sometimes the form is completely missing. Okay, when it comes to designation of beneficiary forms, the 2823, sometimes they're not signed, sometimes they do not have 2 witnesses, and sometimes the shares do not equal 100%. We need to make sure that they equal 100%. Okay, the next section is post-56 military deposits. Okay, sometimes the IRR is missing, and of course, we want to see that documentation on an IRR stating that it's paid in full and the date that transaction happened. And then, of course, sometimes the DD 214 is missing, and we cannot provide credit unless we see this form. Okay, this category has been broken down into 3 types of errors: military service errors, military retired pay errors, and post-56 deposit errors. We want to make sure you nail all 3. Depending on the case, you want to make sure what type of case it is. If it's a military service, if it's military retired pay, if it's post-56 military retired payments, you want to make sure that it are either paid and documented. Okay, still talking about post-56 military deposits. Sometimes they're only partially paid, and OPM does not know what to do with that partially paid deposit. For partial paid deposits, we need to determine if the payment is pending, is going to be paid in full. We particularly need to know about post-56 military deposits that are paid just prior to retirement, and if a post-56 IRR is still forthcoming, because we need that documentation. And if a post-56 deposit is paid prior to retirement, include all the post-56 worksheets in the retirement package and a copy of the annuitant's check to be matched with the payment information so the claim the claim can be issued pending receipt of the IRR. So you don't want to leave OPM hanging and thinking that a partially paid deposit. We see a partial payment, we're thinking that the documentation is saying that it's fully paid is coming. So you want to make sure that that is happening, and it probably creates a discussion that you might want to have at your payroll centers. Okay, military retired pay. Okay, military retired pay waiver or intent to waive letter is not included. OPM needs that letter attached to the application, and the award letter or other proof of combat incurred disability or reserve retainer retired pay sometimes is not included, and it needs to be included. So just kind of document to the side of your case to what to look for. There's a lot of little items, a lot of little tedious items to include in the packet. And if they're not there, you're going to get dinged on the audit. So you want to make sure that you just create a little note stating what needs to be inserted in these cases and just make it happen before you send it off to payroll. Okay, so other development issues that OPM see other development issues. Okay, so alternative form of annuity, the excess deduction rollover election is not included. For CSRS offset cases, we don't see that the AC requested the offset. Deposits and redeposit election letters sent. Sometimes the insurable interest election is erroneously done or is done improperly. And if you're a postal employee, postal earnings are requested. We have to request the postal earnings. I'm sorry. And then verification of military retired pay waiver is requested, and verification of workers' compensation. These are all things that OPM has to do in developing the cases that you send that are incomplete. Okay, so if they're done prior to us receiving them, it will be great. It will push the case along further the first time it is eyeballed by a specialist. Okay, and I have a few more other issues that impact retirements. This cursor up here. Okay, other issues. Okay, so we need to provide correct points of contact on Schedule D. I've talked about this already. We need a point of contact in case something is wrong and we need to discuss it. We require that you hold on to your OPS for at least 6 months in case OPM has questions. I would say hold them for a year because things happen. I have cases where people have OPM has questions on cases over a year. So it's up to you, but 6 months is the requirement. Okay, SCD calculations. All potentially credible service should be included in the retirement SCD. It's the makeup of your SCD is all of your federal service, not just your creditable service. Okay, and the EOPF. OPM cannot access EOPF documents, email or fax needed information from EOPF when it is requested. Okay, when we ask you to hold the OPF for at least 6 months in case there's documentation that is missing from the retirement package, and we come back to you, or in case we need copies of SF50s, that's why we ask that you annotate your information on the application. We also ask that you provide a copy of the calculation that you provide to the employee. That this will help us out in trying to determine a potential discrepancy. And we do not have access to your EOPF, so we need to ensure that you go online for all that are retiring and print out the health and life insurance forms and all other necessary forms. Okay, other issues that impact retirements. Agency inquiries relating to FERCA determinations should be directed to benefit officers, liaison, and development. Okay, that is the section that actually hosts the training. So your headquarters level benefits officer has that direct link to this office. Okay, they are the individuals in bold are the liaisons to the benefits office. So it's your responsibility to utilize the benefits office to disseminate information on cases that have issues. Okay, scanned OPF documents only are acceptable, not retirement documents. Okay, so and I mentioned the BAL for COVID procedures kind of changed how we do things during telework. So you want to take a look at that in case you don't have an idea of the changes that occurred that we listed in that BAL. And for OWCP enhancement eligibility based on BAL 04-105 needs to be identified on certified summary of federal service. Okay. OWCP enhancement eligibility. This is the BAL 04-105. This provision is designed to make up for FERS beneficiaries' inability to participate in Social Security or the Thrift Savings Plan during a period of absence from the workplace while receiving workers' compensation. The purpose of the benefits administration letter is to provide guidance on when and how this enhanced annuity formula is applied. So if you're working with a case that involves OWCP enhancement eligibility, you want to check out this this BAL, which is BAL 04105. Let's see if there's anything else I need to. Oh, and like I said before, for cases, OPM needs the SF50s correcting coverage, the election letter with the employee signature, and a copy of the complete package. Okay, let's talk about the scanned documents policy. Okay, so we will accept scanned documents that were in the OPF before the employee applied for retirement. We cannot accept any scanned portion or schedule of the following forms. Okay, and those forms are listed here. SF 2800, 3104, so on and so forth. These forms cannot be accepted as a scanned portion. Now, you might want to check that BAL to be sure that it is not included on that list of exceptions. Okay, but these forms, retirement forms, there should be, we don't take scanned portions or scanned copies of these forms. Okay. Photocopies and signed documents. Where can I get it on the screen? This is still a scan policies document. SF 3112, which is a documentation of support of disability, the 2802, so on and so forth. These forms are part of the scan documents policy. Okay, you want to revisit that BAL to if you need further guidance, check out that BAL. Okay, so further photocopies and signed documents. You want to see BAL 1 and 2, which is 12-102, and for agency submissions only. Okay, BAL 12-102 for photocopies and signed documents. It'll give you what you need so you won't make the mistakes of submitting photocopy signed documents or scanned documents if they're not permitted. Okay, and then you want to make sure you look at the BAL that is a temporary process during COVID telework policies. Okay, so that concludes this presentation. So if you guys have any questions, I'm going to go to the feed. We have a few minutes. Actually, I got this done in less than 2 hours. So we hope that you found this session useful and that you will provide it with information that you will be able to take back to your agency to be successful in getting those submissions to OPM. I'm going to go through the feed and see what questions I have. But before I do that, I want to share my social media. You can find me on LinkedIn, Johnny R. Bynum Jr. My Instagram is JohnnyB_official, and my personal email is johnnybynum@me.com. And I'm giving this information because I get questions on benefits and retirement processing all the time. And this is my personal information, okay? And of course, I have an OPM email address, but of course, you guys, like I said, office, I am part of Benefit Officers Liaison Development, and we have a direct link to your benefits officer. So that is where you would go to your benefits officer to get those questions answered. And if he or she cannot answer those questions, they will bring it to our attention. Okay, so now let me go to the feed and see what questions we have. Let's see. I don't see any questions here. Hold on, it's working. Maybe it's coming through. Okay, let's see. Okay, it says some are having problems with the link. Sorry about that. I wasn't privy to that information until now. Let me see. I don't see any questions here. I see that we have 584 attendees, but I don't see any questions. That is odd. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. This is my very first time using MS Teams, so give me a minute to try to find what I'm looking for here. Let's see. Show conversation. Nope. Okay, I don't see any questions. I'm going to let someone on the team enlighten me if there are any questions I need to answer. Okay, if there are no questions, then I'm going to end the session here. It's been a pleasure speaking to you, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Thank you.